to the Illinois Realtors Weekly Podcast, keeping you up to date with all the latest news in the realtor world. I'm Jeremy, and guys, there is a ton of legal news out there, so who are we going to bring in but our General Counsel and VP of Legal Services, Ms. Betsy Urbance, back into the studio. Betsy, thank you for being here.
Well, here I am again, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about all the stuff we don't know the answer to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're going to give you tons of updates on things today that will need further updates in the future, exactly. Basically. But lots of important things happening, not even just as like national interest, but definitely for real estate interests as well on the federal level a ton right now. So we want to start off here by asking you, of course, what is looming large over the new incoming administration is this potential TikTok ban, which of course was passed as a law, but now there's, I believe, an update as there were arguments heard at the Supreme Court today. So could you, and day of recording Friday, so could you tell us a little bit of an update on what was said during these hearings? I
can give you an update. I can't give you any concrete answers, sure. But I will tell you that the oral arguments went on for 2.5 hours. Woo! So there's a lot to unpack there, but I'm going to try to high level summarize.
She's going to try to summarize 2.5 hours here, guys.
Yeah. And just to go backwards a little bit, just in case you're under a rock or if you're a person that doesn't use TikTok like myself, but all the young people and children use it. TikTok is the short form video platform. It's used, they say, like by 170 million, give or take, users in a month. Yeah. And I would be willing to bet that many of those users are our own real estate professionals.
I would imagine.
So I do think it is a matter of great importance in our industry. I also want to be clear that TikTok USA is the American arm or subsidiary of the Chinese-owned company ByteDance.
And this is where a lot of the craziness of the laws come in.
Wherein lies the rub. ByteDance is the developer, and they own this magical algorithm that helps to curate. I think that's curate the content.
Curate the content.
Yeah, I could be using that completely incorrectly.
So now we'll add tech mogul to your titles as well, Betsy.
Because that's me, tech, high tech.
High tech.
Yes, with my yellow paper and my ink pen. But the algorithm helps them determine what content their users want to see.
Right. So, which is the bread and butter for all high-tech social media companies nowadays.
I think so, yeah. And my daughter can say, she'll tell me, TikTok. She loves TikTok because it's got her feed curated very well for her.
Yeah. They feed you all that stuff you're interested in.
Is scary.
I mean, yeah, it's a little crazy.
Useful, but a little scary. So anyway, let's get on to the oral arguments at the Supreme Court today. So how did we get there? Well, we got there because there's this bipartisan federal act, and there's a big, long name for it. But the bottom line was that if the U.S. TikTok company did not, or if the ByteDance part of the corporate owner of TikTok USA did not divest itself of ownership to some U.S.-owned entity by January 19, 2025, then it would be banned.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to get TikTok
from use in the
App
US.
Stores, Google Store, anywhere.
App Store, go there. It wouldn't be available, and service providers that would help disseminate the TikTok information wouldn't be able to do so.
Right. And that was actually passed as law and signed by President Biden, if I remember right. So
correct.
That is what we are under right now.
That is what we're under.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then they went to SCOTUS today to, I guess, well, update us a little bit on that, because what exactly was the point of the hearing today?
So TikTok argues that in litigation that the law violates their free speech rights.
Right. Yeah.
So what it boils down to is an argument or a conflict between free speech rights of Americans and issues of national security.
Right.
The government that enacted the law, the legislature, would argue that the interest of national security and the fact that the People's Republic of China, PRC, China, whatever you want to call it, would have access to all this data of Americans,
right,
and then could use the data and the application for nefarious purposes.
Right. So their argument would be that the national security interests outweigh the potential First Amendment violations.
Correct.
Right.
And there was also a point made this morning in the oral arguments that China as a country, or any foreign nation for that matter, does not have free speech rights.
That's also it's an interesting
in the United States.
Yeah.
It's Americans.
Yeah, it's like the First Amendment protects all speech, but it only protects our free speech. Right. You know, it doesn't extend to other countries.
The government argues that their argument is that this interest of national security is really content neutral.
Okay.
And so that if the company would divest itself, if ByteDance would divest itself of ownership to a U.S.-owned company, then they're good to go. The sticking point is this algorithm.
Right.
Because the TikTok folks believe that they have to have this particular algorithm
for the app to work the way it does. That's made it so popular.
Yes, thank you for filling in the blanks in my technological
well, no, but you're absolutely right there. Like, the algorithm is like, for all of these companies, that is like the secret sauce to how they, get so much value out of their company. So that is highly protected.
Right. So these are the conflicting interests that were argued before the United States Supreme Court this morning. So what could happen as a result?
Yeah.
That's what everybody wants to know.
Buckle up, everyone. Here's all the scenarios.
The $10 million question.
Yeah.
Well, Supreme Court of the United States could stay the enforcement of the act until it makes a decision.
Right.
Or until it sends it back to the court to make a decision on the merits of the case itself. It could not render a decision, and the law would go into effect on January 19th,
like originally stated.
And, the attorney for TikTok, when asked that question, said what would happen on the 19th if it goes into effect. And he essentially said it would go dark.
Yeah.
Meaning not available on the app stores and not being disseminated by the service providers that disseminate the information.
Right.
So that could happen.
Yeah.
On the 19th.
And there's a lot of logistical craziness with that too, because there's a lot of people with their Twitter X or their Facebook accounts linked to their TikTok accounts. Right. So lots of stuff to untangle there if that does happen.
Yes, indeed. And if you think about it, January 19th just happens to be the eve of or the day before January 20th, which is Inauguration Day for a new administration.
Right.
The new administration says that they will not enforce the act.
So they're on record saying that.
Well, actually, there was an amicus brief filed, which was kind of odd because they're not really a party to anything.
Not a party to it
until the 20th.
Yeah.
But there was an amicus brief filed that said that they should stay any sort of action on this law until the new administration gets in there and they can figure out what's going on. But there has been a statement made that a new administration would issue an order that they would not enforce the act. Now, that's kind of a heavy lift for any company, TikTok, the company itself, and any other tangential entity involved with use of the TikTok app is, are they going to rely on that? Because you've got a federal agency that would be the enforcement agency, and then you have the executive branch saying, well, we're not enforcing it. So,
So theoretically, if Apple App Store took, the new administration at their word, kept TikTok in the App Store, theoretically, they'd be in a murky area as to whether or not they were breaking a federal law.
Correct.
So, a little bit of dicey ground to stand on there.
Yes. But I suppose what could happen is ByteDance could divest.
Sure.
And sell to a U.S.-owned company. Would TikTok get the use of the ByteDance algorithm? We don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
That's in another arena, but that's another possibility. So here we are on January 10th, Friday, January 10th, going into a weekend, going to the 19th. This could get really crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many variables up in the air with this right now, least of which is, of course, even though these arguments for 2.5 hours at SCOTUS, there is no judgment yet today, and there probably won't be till next week, right? So
if there is even next week.
Yeah, so just hurtling towards that cliff, everyone.
Yes is the answer to all those possibilities. So what we need to do is stay tuned.
Yeah.
We need to stay tuned, and we'll report anything concrete that happens, but we're definitely following the case that's of interest to so many of our members.
So in a practical sense for our membership, what do they need to know right now from this case and kind of moving forward the possibilities of what might happen here for their businesses?
Okay, for their businesses, what they need to know is that we know they can use TikTok until January 19th.
Right.
Will TikTok go dark on January 19th? At this moment in time, we don't know for sure.
I mean, from what we know right now, there's nothing that said the law won't go into effect on the 19th yet.
Correct.
Like that's the current trajectory
we're on. The current trajectory we're on is that we're headed towards this ban on January 19th.
Right.
Unless word comes down from the Supreme Court that there's some sort of stay or some sort of injunction in place to not enforce that act.
Right.
So they need to know, essentially, that it could go into effect, but stay tuned to all of your real estate channels.
Right.
And all channels, if you will, to stay up to date on whether or not there's some sort of stay on the enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely. We here at Weekly and at Illinois Realtors in the legal team will be staying on top of this. So the second anything changes in that, we will get that information out to you.
Yeah, a couple seconds.
We'll check it out first. Yeah. Make sure everything's good.
Right.
But yeah, it's a very fluid situation. So you're right. I honestly, I stay politically engaged. I have no clue where this might be going.
I don't know that anybody really does at this point. What also could possibly happen is that, it goes dark for a minute on the 19th. And by minute, I'm using that somewhat facetiously. But then the next day on the 20th, when you have a new administration, things could change.
Yeah. So...
Yeah.
All right, everyone, stay tuned. We'll see what happens coming up here with the TikTok ban. But as you said, Betsy, just the moving parts are all over the place there. So this really is one you're just going to have to keep paying attention to until we have a little bit more information for you. But
correct.
I guess if you're a legal wonk, go to find those oral arguments and listen to them.
I'll tell you, it is really, I'm a legal wonk. So it's interesting to listen to the arguments and then try to figure out which justice is asking the question when they don't identify them by name.
Right.
But it's really pretty.
Yeah, and this is an interesting case, it really is just like about the constitutional powers of the government. So.
Well, yeah, just the battle, if you will, between free speech rights and
national security.
Those are
the everlasting fight of the United States.
Two really big ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to another topic here as well, because this is something that actually Matt Rentschler, our attorney here, he talked about this in the New Year, New Laws video series, which is these new FinCEN disclosure requirements, which have been out there. As he expertly said in his first video for that, he gave us a great breakdown of it, but also said, hey, there's also an injunction in this case that is making its way through appeals, so that might change. Lo and behold, it did change again, and he offered an update right there in the moment. And now I think we have even more news on this. So cue the breaking news sound effect here. But what's the new updates here when it comes to this new law?
Okay, the latest on the Corporate Transparency Act, which, as you alluded to, is the requirement of entities, domestic entities, corporations, trusts, LLCs, for their beneficial interest owners. So that is defined by like 25% or more of the particular entity. Those folks would have to disclose. Those entities would have to disclose those beneficial interest owners to the Department of the Treasury FinCEN network, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network.
There we go.
Yeah. So I'll just call it FinCEN.
FinCEN. It's a lot easier. It's fun to say.
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah. So the lawsuit was filed by plaintiffs, essentially folks that are saying you can't make me disclose the beneficial interest ownership of these entities. So they filed suit in district court in Texas, and I think other places too. But the District Court of Texas enjoined or put an injunction in place against the requirement to disclose.
Right.
Bottom line, the you can't make me people didn't have to disclose pursuant to that injunction.
Yes.
Okay. So,
and I think that's where we were the first video we did with Matt.
That's where we were, and then things were changing like as he was recording.
Exactly, and
so
then and then we recorded an update, which was, of course,
go back downstairs.
Yeah.
So then a panel of the appellate court in that federal jurisdiction in Texas, I think it's in Texas.
Yeah.
The motions panel.
Right.
They took, I'm going to use not legal terms. Right. They took the injunction off.
Right.
In other words, no, you guys have to report.
So now we're back to yes, you do have to report.
Yes, you do have to report, but you don't have to report by January 1, which is
right. They moved the deadline back, if I remember,
to
like the 13th, if I remember
by
right?
January 13th.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then another panel of the same appellate court said, no. The injunction is back in place.
My God, this is more a twist than a Christopher Nolan movie here, people.
Yeah, and this was all happening within days of each other.
Right.
So the injunction is currently in place. So right now, no one is required to report beneficial interest owners to FinCEN.
There you go.
At this moment. However.
But wait, there's more.
The federal government, right, has appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
So we're still on the road. Wow.
So here we go.
Yeah.
What is the U.S. Supreme Court going to do with it at this point? We don't know.
We don't know.
But we will keep you posted.
Right.
Why does this matter to you? Because if you are a real estate brokerage company that is organized as a corporation or an LLC or even certain trusts, there are some exceptions to the law as usual. So, lawyers like to say generally speaking.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, brokerage companies would have a duty to disclose the beneficial interest owners of their companies,
right?
However they're formed, to FinCEN.
Okay.
Right now, this minute.
Yeah.
At 3:06 on Friday, January 10th.
Right.
They do not have to report.
Okay, so they are not under that yet. Because
we are operating under the injunction.
Right. So no reporting has to happen right now, even with the 13th deadline there.
Correct.
Right.
Right now.
But that's because we are going to the Supreme Court, and as always, might change.
Might change. Might change sooner, might change later.
Right. And so through all of these appeals, injunctions, throwing out of injunctions, like have the core tenets of the arguments from both sides been the same, or have they kind of been shifting here?
I don't think so. I just don't even think they've heard the merits.
They haven't
really
even heard the merits. Okay, I got you.
No.
Okay, so now this whole thing, this whole saga of this reporting requirement heads to the Supreme Court. What are the possibilities once it gets to the Supreme Court? Whichever way they choose, what happens then?
Right. Well, in this case, the Supreme Court is debating the question of whether to keep the injunction, the temporary injunction, in place while the lower courts determine what the order should be with regard to this. This act is in place.
Right.
Okay, so the act is in place. The federal law says you got to report. First it said by January 1, then it said by January 13, but now there's an injunction that says the law, even though the law is in place, while everything's going up through the lower courts, you don't have to abide by the law.
Right.
So the Supreme Court in this case is asking itself the question, do we keep the injunction in place, meaning people don't have to report,
right,
while the lower courts figure all this stuff out, whether to uphold the law or not,
right,
or it says, no, the law's in force, taking the injunction off here we go.
And so I guess the other part of that too would be, so say they take the injunction away and the law is in effect.
Yeah.
That still means there would be this case at the lower courts, right, to see if the law is still sound.
Yes.
But you would have to abide by it until those courts decide.
The law would still proceed while people were abiding. The question to the court would still proceed.
Right.
But the law would be enforceable while the cases are proceeding.
Right. So right now, our members, we do not have to adhere to this. There is no reporting that is required.
Not this minute.
Not this minute. Check your phones for when you hear this, yes. But that is what the court's deciding, whether or not you do have to start doing this or you don't, but the law will still be moving its way through the courts.
Yes. The question of the law. The law is there. So the question of the enforceability of it, yes.
All right. So there you go, everyone. No reporting is required right now. But again, stay tuned. All the social media channels, all of our communication channels, as always, legal, IllinoisRealtors.org/legal. And just make sure you are staying up to date with it. All right. Well, as you can see, everyone, tons of stuff going on. And I don't just mean this for me, but I know all the members feel this too. We are just so thankful for you and for our legal team that keeps up to date and keeps us on top so that we're all of our businesses are staying legal and we're in good standing. It is just so much to think about and so much to work through, but we really do have the best team here at Illinois Realtors to keep them involved. So just thank you so much for all that you're doing and for keeping us up to date, and please don't stop.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for having me, and I just want to thank my legal team.
Yeah.
Matt and Vicky are just beyond reproach, and they keep us all. They're the engine.
They're the best.
Yes.
The absolute best. We need to make some trading cards or something
to
commemorate. Legal trading cards coming soon for Illinois.
I'm sure those will sell like hotcakes.
Exactly. But as always, everyone, I already said it in the middle, but again, make sure you're staying up to date with this. Follow us on all the social media channels, Illinois Realtors, but definitely go to IllinoisRealtors.org/legal, and you will always be up to date with any legal happenings. In addition to all podcasts and videos and stuff, they are writing constantly on that webpage. Yeah. So that is how you will be kept up to date. So once again, Betsy Urban, thank you so much for being here, and come back anytime.
All right. Thanks.
And as always, everyone, thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Illinois Realtors Weekly Podcast. As always, give us a rating and a review on your podcast app of choice. And if you have any more questions, simply search for Illinois Realtors on your favorite social media app. We will see you next week.